Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Johanna Kaba. I'm the Communications Manager here at Coleridge, and thank you for your continued support of our Data for Evidence Building webinar series. This is the second session of the series, and more information on upcoming sessions will be shared soon. In today's session, we will be discussing the data systems and analytical approaches necessary for evidence-based policymaking. We will provide an overview of the applied data analytics training programs, discuss resulting data products and insights, and introduce a new training offering. Our speakers for today are Dr. Nathan Barrett, Vice President of Products and Development at Coleridge Initiative, Ben Feeder, Senior Manager of Training and Data Analytics, and Dr. Corey Sparks, Senior Research Scientist. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them in the Q&A chat, and we will do our best to answer them towards the end. The recording for this session, along with additional materials, including FAQs and presentation slides, will be shared within the next 2 weeks. With that said, let's welcome our first speaker, Ben.
Thanks, Joanna. Hi, and welcome. So I'm going to be providing, I think, for the next 10 to 15 minutes, just some overview on our traditional applied data analytics training programs, a little bit of the approach. But before we talk about the approach, I just want to put up a slide here of our goal, and I'll just briefly read out the goal for everyone. So our goal in broad terms is to train data and policy experts within government agencies and academic institutions on working with restricted access microdata hosted inside a secure research facility, which was and that secure research facility, I believe, was discussed in the previous webinar series. We might be referring to that in the future as the ADRF. For those who are unfamiliar, ADRF is shorthand for the Administrative Data Research Facility. So when we refer to the secure research facility, we might be referring to the ADRF or Administrative Data Research Facility. Mackenzie, we could go to the next slide. So that's just our broad strokes, again, our goal, but how do we actually do that in practice? So we start every single training program with the question of what keeps you up at night? And that question is to potential sponsors, collaborators, data providers for the training programs, because ultimately the training program is going to come not from us, but from the people that we work with. And so when we ask that question about what keeps you up at night, we're really focusing on specific issues that are present and ideally addressable within agencies, and mostly at the state level. But we also, as I'll show in a few slides, have some training programs that we've done at the federal level as well. So when we think about these issues, then the next question is logically, well, what data do we have that we can use or that we're already using to answer these types of questions? And so traditionally that has gone back to mostly administrative data. Sometimes we've also incorporated some restricted access survey data into our training programs. And a lot of these data sources are not super clean, perfect, kind of your ideal, if you will, training sources, but they're real world, and they're good practice for some of the data that you might be seeing if you're tackling this problem, your own agency or organization. And so the majority, or maybe not the majority, but a key component of the class is really focusing on the ins and outs of these different data sources, some of the values that they might be taking on, what to do with missingness, and everything kind of in between there, all the different data elements, what coverage looks like as well. So a lot of the class is focused and kind of bespoke to the actual data sources that we're using and the larger data infrastructure that's required to answer these types of questions. Of course, we are not the only people usually doing this work. So what we'll try and do is we might bring in a guest lecturer or two to come in and supplement a lecture perhaps on cohort analysis and talk about some of their previous work or something around maybe interoperability and what that looks like across different states to help build this community of practice, ideally, that we're trying to kind of bring about through the training programs. And finally, we really believe that through our training programs, the best way to learn is by doing. So everything is focused and it's applied data analytics. It is all about applying the concepts that we discuss in the class to the data to answer these types of questions of what keeps you up at night. And ideally, the data providers, our sponsors, our collaborators, that a product that they will have, and Nate will talk about this in a little bit, a product that they will get that's tangible from these classes is a handful of projects of research that's done by these diverse teams of ranging from policy experts to our programmers and everything in between. So what that means is we basically have we have our lectures where we're talking about the concepts, we're introducing the data, we're talking about the specific issues with the policy. And then we talk about the concepts that's required to actually build out and answer these questions. And then we have these diverse teams, and we split the participants up into these teams to actually apply these concepts to specific projects. And throughout that, we try and keep it flexible because we're always asking for feedback from the participants. We understand that every single person learns a little bit differently. And so we want to make sure that that's the best experience possible. So you'll see in a few slides, we pulled some broad quotes from some of our surveys. And generally for the classes, we have about 20 to 30 people in a class, but that changes. And Mackenzie, we can go to the next slide. So what this looks like is in practice is we have 36 classes since we first started in 2017. That 36 number does not include a separate training that was actually inspired by one that we hosted with Rutgers in the state of New Jersey that they took and then applied separately. So we're super proud of this number, but we have 1,000 participants. We'll get into, we'll show a visualization that shows what that expansion looks like over time. 340 plus organizations across 40 plus states, and then many federal agencies as well. As you can see on the visualization on the table on the right-hand side, these trainings are in a variety of different domains. For example, for education to workforce, some teams have looked at something like cross-state mobility, and that's translated into a project or a product that we'll discuss in a little bit. Just moving down to the fourth one on there, co-enrollment. We have a series of classes that we are hosting right now on evaluating enrollment to employment pipelines and pathways. And so a lot of that is looking at co-enrollment across different service programs. And then just right below that, we have experiences of formerly incarcerated individuals. Their teams have built really fascinating visualizations around what employment looks like after exiting the justice system. In total, as you can see on the bottom there, we have 218 completely different projects that we're all super proud of. Mackenzie, we can go to the next slide, please. So this slide has a lot of information. This is more so for reference if you wanted to look back at this. Basically, how we deliver the trainings is in two different modules. The first module, which we call our Foundations of Data and Technical Literacy module, the goal there is to develop a baseline. We're using public data to get familiar with our secure data research facility and some of these core class concepts so that once we start to apply them to the data in the next module, then we can all talk from this using this common language and using common concepts that have already been discussed. Then we get into more of the analytical training, that second module, where we go into more of a traditional kind of classroom setting where the first hour is traditionally devoted to lectures, and that's where everything will be applied to the specific topic at hand. So for example, if we're talking about cohorts and it's our unemployment to reemployment focused class, then we're going to be talking about how we can develop cohorts and what that pipeline looks like within the entire system that feeds into the data that we're seeing here, and different options for how we can develop cohorts there. And so everything is applied, and then we take those concepts and we apply them in the different project teams. The teams are about 5 to 6 people per team. So they're, again, diverse between your policy experts, some coders, and everything in between. It really varies based off of the type of class there. And then there's some time after that second module is completed where teams will work on finalizing their analysis, extracting or developing visualizations and extracting those visualizations from our secure data research facility into what culminates in these final presentations. In total, the courses traditionally will last around 3 to 4 months, assuming that lectures once to twice a week, but that depends based off of the data provider requests, collaborator requests, and we've been flexible in the past about that. We go to the next slide. So when we think about training and when we build out all of our trainings, mention that each training is a little different because it's specific to the data and the questions. However, these 3 pillars are consistent across all of our trainings and really our ultimate goals and why we continue to offer these trainings. So the first one is capacity building, and that's of course the concepts, but beyond just teaching core data analysis, data science concepts, that's also working with new data infrastructure that you might not have had access to in your own state or your own agency, your own organization, where this can almost be a trial run for you to see what does it look like when we link our education data to our workforce data, and what happens when we then incorporate in apprenticeship data. What does that infrastructure look like? What are the different types of questions that we can ask? And so this visualization, as promised earlier, this kind of shows the expansion of what that looks like over time here. And of course, we pulled one quote here from a 2022 fall participant, talking about how they now use R for repeatable data manipulations that were done in Excel, which is certainly a quote that put a smile on all of our faces. Mackenzie, we go to the next slide. So then the next pillar is network development. This visualization here shows networks from a data perspective and linking all of the different data sources and distinct data sources together within the scope of the training programs. However, the networks expands beyond just the data. It expands to the people. We try and develop these classes the idea is to break down some of the work that might be happening in silos across states, across agencies, and everything else in between as well. So when we're thinking about networks, we want to create this collaborative community of practice around working with data that spans across different jurisdictions, across different agencies, as well as for people who may not necessarily always communicate with each other on a day-to-day, opening up some of those communication lines, talking about different considerations, different works in different paths. And then finally, the last pillar that we really think about, and Nate will be talking about this in 1 second, is product development. There are 2 key products that have really been developed or inspired by some of the projects in our training programs. The training programs and the projects can also, effectively can be used as piloting work for something that a group may be interested in developing in their own state, in their own agency, in their own organization. And we can use the class time, again, as what is a preliminary product? What does our proof of concept look like? Is this something that is worth implementing and devoting resources to a full-scale build for? And so 2 of the products that have been inspired by projects from our ADA training programs, one is this is using fake data, but is very similar to our unemployment to reemployment portal, or not our, but the unemployment to reemployment portal that was inspired by one of the unemployment to reemployment training programs. And then the second product that has been directly inspired by a project in our applied data analytics training program was through some of the education to workforce classes. And it is the multi-state post-secondary report developed by the Kentucky Center for Statistics. And so you can see this quote here. We were able to take the unemployment to reemployment dashboard and adapt it to our needs. That's also what we're talking about in terms of product development. It may not always be new products, but it's also the expansion of existing products but I don't want to talk too much about that because we're going to be talking about that in next. And so I'll hand it over to my colleague, Nate.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. And thanks to all of you. I'm seeing on the participant list a lot of familiar names and a lot of new ones. And we do really appreciate y'all taking time out of your day to spend with us to hear more about what we're up to. So again, we're humbled by that, and a lot of thanks to you all for spending time. So, Ben kind of talked through a little bit of, what we do in the training classes, and a core part of that, we can't do anything in the training if we don't have the data infrastructure from which to do it, right? And so, in thinking about state efforts more generally, there's a lot of effort in thinking critically about what data do we need to bring together. And as Ben mentioned, well, those questions that keep us up at night, right? And so when we think about those questions is what data do we need to bring together? How do we develop that data infrastructure? And then how do we learn how to use it, right? But for me, it doesn't stop there. And the question that keeps me up at night is saying, okay, well, how do we go from the art of the possible to making it a reality, right? And so when I think about this, I think back to other work I've done in the past and just in grad work and just in former research. And I always think about the data infrastructure, the time that we spend as researchers or analysts to build data that sort of gets used for that one-off purpose, but then we don't continue to use it. It's similar to this idea of not necessarily building a bridge to nowhere, but spending a lot of investment in building a bridge and you only make one trip. Well, we're thinking about, this, I always call it the field of dreams problem. And I know I'm dating myself on the reference a little bit here, but for those of you who don't know, there's a quote in the movie that says, if you build it, they will come. And really it's not necessarily, that's part of it, right? You need to have the infrastructure built, but that doesn't necessitate that people will come and we will actively use it to improve the evidence base from which we make policy decisions, right? It's a huge part of what we're doing here is thinking about how do we go from building this infrastructure to then thinking about how we engage use. And the way that we think about that is if we want to innovate and we want to think, the projects that happen in the classes are a great foundation for using the infrastructure, kicking the tires on it, thinking about the sandbox of innovation and really coming up with really interesting use cases, right? But then there's the what's next question. And that's where we spend a lot of our time now is thinking about how do we help states, agencies, or other partners in thinking about how to use this data infrastructure to get at some of those key questions with products that are useful, right? And so, so really, just to summarize that, we think that I'm an economist by training, and so I always think about it's the data infrastructure is a necessary but not sufficient condition for driving data insights, right? We need something more. And so what I always, again, the question I ask myself often is how do we best support the institutionalization of the use of this infrastructure, right? As we move to the next slide, I think of products being that thing. But I think it's helpful if we're all kind of working off this same idea of what we're defining as products. And luckily, I'm defining it very, very broadly, right? Because this work, the end-to-end work, if you think about the analytics and research life cycle, a lot of time spent just on the front end of building the data infrastructure. And there's a lot of things that go into that we don't normally think of as products, but they very much are. The data infrastructure itself is a product. The code that's used to create the linkages to get these data to communicate to each other is a product. The way that we apply standardization and models to help those interoperability of those data systems is a product. The measures that are then created because we're able to think more deeply about the issues that face us, those are products. And I could go on, but I'll stop there. But I think it's really important to think that even in that infrastructure building, there are things that are being developed that can be replicated elsewhere. And we've done that in a lot of places where the approach that we use to standardize data to help build that infrastructure is deployable elsewhere, so that we are not reinventing the wheel every time we are faced with new opportunities to create linked data. In the governance and agreements, and I'm sure there's plenty of people on this call that would agree that the governance, the way the rules by which we met out access, the rules by which we establish the proper use cases, is an incredibly important and part of what we talk about with data infrastructure. But oftentimes we're thinking immediately about the nuts and bolts of data and the products, the end products we'll develop. But even the approaches to governance, the approaches to agreement should be thought of as products as well. And so then, we think about the platform, right? And so this is a product, and Ben had mentioned the EDRF earlier, the Administrative Data Research Facility. That's very much a product. It's our platform by which we can maintain data stewardship control. So agencies still maintain control over what's happening with their data. It facilitates the governance and agreements processes. And it is a safe and secure, we're FedRAMP moderate. And that's the way that this data can be accessed and used, all governed by the data stewards that ultimately own what's going on with their data. Once those things are in place, then we can talk about dashboards, and that's where I'll go the rest of the time. But it felt a little too quick to talk immediately about dashboards without talking about some of the foundational products that are necessary to help facilitate the sort of end dashboards and products that where you can articulate outcomes, articulate data-driven insights. And that's where the dashboards come in. But the question remains, okay, how are these insights communicated to whom, for what purpose? We as Coleridge don't do this in a vacuum. We're very much about working in the collaborative community with our state partners, our collaborative partners at other foundations and organizations, to think through where are the gaps in our knowledge base? Where can we develop products? What do they need to say, and who needs to access them? So as we move to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about what that process looks like. So when we think about research and development, right? I mean, and that's very much what we're doing in the training classes. That's our R&D space, right? We're really getting a handle on that sort of art of the possible. Where do we have opportunities to think more in depth about some of the challenges we face, right? And now we can align those with the needs and priorities. And as Ben mentioned, we do these classes in partnership with folks based around those questions that keep you up at night, right? And so you can think about the projects, the things that are coming from training as that R&D, right? Not everything's going to be a home run, but we're learning the art of the possible, right? From there, we move to products. This is where we design and build, and we're thinking we're now refining some of those projects and thinking about what are we communicating to whom, for what purpose. And we're starting to refine those products. We're developing measures and metrics. We're thinking about those things that are necessary for folks to take the information, apply it to what's happening within their agencies, within the questions that they have, so they can make decisions that are data driven, right? And then there's the implementation. Once we've designed and built, we need to implement. And this isn't a one and done thing, right? Implementation is very much about testing. It's practical. When we think about feedback loops and redesign, I don't think we'll ever be under an illusion that the first thing that is done is the best thing that's done. I think all of us probably have experiences in our professional lives where our first take at something was a good start, but there's always room for refinement. And I think it's a really important part about what we do. And we've refined even the unemployment to reemployment dashboard with Kentucky Stats. We've implementing new ways to think about the multi-state feedback report. These things are living dashboards. They're not static from the perspective of we've created it and that's the end product. These things have a life of their own and can continue to be redesigned as feedback comes in on what's important, because our needs and policy questions change over time. So as we move to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the challenges with what we face when we're doing, when we're building dashboards, right? So I think many of you probably have experience with dashboards, with working in systems like Tableau, Power BI, other things like that, right? So when we set out to do this and think about our design and our approach, we wanted to think about some key priorities and challenges that we face when we do this, right? Reproducibility is probably one of the biggest ones, right? Nobody wants to go back and sort of every time they want to create their dashboard, they have to essentially reinvent the wheel or do repeated things over and over and over again, right? We have to think about how we can leverage automation, how we can leverage our code bases so that we can be reproducible at lower cost, and so that we can update things, we maintain consistency, iterate where needed when we get our feedback, but we need things to be reproducible in a timely fashion. We also want them to be scalable and adaptable. How easy is it to adopt new data infrastructure into the dashboard? So if we have a dashboard in one state, how easy is that to scale into another state? How easy is it to adapt to that feedback that we're receiving, right? And then multiple use cases. This is one where we've made a lot of progress in thinking of some of the core challenges that we face when we're using restricted use data. And one of the major ones is thinking about some of the tiered access that we can create, because not everybody needs to see the micro level data, but some people do. But they may not be native coders, they may not be native data analysts, but they still need to see what's happening in cell sizes that would otherwise be suppressed, things that would be redacted, that they may care about what's happening in that cell. And when we start doing finer cuts of data, we lose oftentimes some of the people that we care the most about understanding because their cell sizes are too small. And so what we can do here is think about how we facilitate dashboards that have different access modalities for different groups of people. Certainly, we would want public-facing ones for folks. Certainly, we would want restricted use ones where folks can see, because there's different use cases that exist, right? And ultimately, we want these dashboards to not be static, but be interactive. We can't always predict every single thing folks are going to want to see, but we're going to want to see, they're going to want to be able to have some interaction with the dashboard so they can manipulate things, create their own views, select different subgroups. That needs to be built into the dashboard, that functionality. So how do we approach this? So going to the next slide, we think through, okay, this is our approach. So what we've done is we're leveraging R Shiny. It's part of R packages, and Posit is our Posit. They have a Workbench and Connect software that allows us to address some of these common challenges. So by using a repeatable, scalable code base, we can have a consistent and rapid solution to reproducing dashboards. They're scalable. We can easily scale them to new data infrastructure. Once we get the data infrastructure in the standardized format, we can replicate it across states, across agencies. As long as we have the underlying data in the same format, we can do that quickly. And it's easily adaptable with feedback and redesign. One example, the unemployment reemployment dashboard that I'll show you again, because we'll do a callback to that. We were able to take that code base that we used for Illinois with the fake data in Illinois, and we were able to apply it to another state and generate that state's dashboard in 30 minutes. That's a game changer. There's no point and click. There's no, I mean, yes, we have to do the front end data cleaning and structuring, but to be able to generate those dashboards that quickly, and for dashboards that we generate on a weekly basis, when we're talking about unemployment claims, those are generated weekly. Being able to scale this and reproduce it quickly is incredibly important. And this also allows us to facilitate multiple use cases. Because these dashboards can live within the ADRF, within the restricted use environment, people can come in and they're logging in with their credentials, they're an approved user, and they immediately go to the dashboard they need to see. They don't need to code, they don't need to do anything. They're immediately in the dashboard. Once they log into the ADRF, they're in the secure environment and they can see the dashboard right away. No need to code, no need to know all of the data infrastructure, all the things they need to do. They don't need to be a data engineer. They can see what they need to see. And again, it's interactive. So they can manipulate the subgroups, they can manipulate the timelines, and they can see the things they need to see. So, so what does this look like in practice? So I'm calling back to this slide because this very much is a look and feel of how this can be when we start to scale this. So this is, again, fake data, I will say. And a side note, we'll also have another webinar that gives a lot more depth in the products, where we'll be doing some live demos of some of the products. But we really wanted to just kind of introduce sort of the process by which we do this today, coupled with the trainings, because the trainings very much do lead to the product development. So this here is again, fake data, but we're using Illinois as the test case. You can see here that we're able to zoom down into a county level. We're able to hover over and we get summary statistics for things. We can set different regions. We can set different week end dates. There's lots of functionality here And this is all scalable. We can add different functionality. These things are constantly in development. This has also been adapted. We're currently adapting this with another state. And so again, depending on the use case, the underlying code base facilitates us being able to adapt to varying needs. Although, you know, states have somewhat similar issues, they're contextualized within that state. And so we need to be able to adapt this framework to a state-specific use case, and this allows us to do this very quickly. So with that, I'll kick it over to Corey, and we'll have time for questions at the end. Corey?
Thanks, Nate. Hi, everybody. I'm Corey Sparks. I'm a senior research scientist here at Coleridge, and I'm very excited to be with y'all today. And what I'm going to be talking about are some of our new offerings that are going to build on our heritage of the ADA trainings and really move us into the next phase of what our trainings at Coleridge look like. Next slide, please. So I'm really excited to be developing, and I'll actually be teaching a series of short classes, short courses in data analytics with various content domains starting in March 2024. This is a new product for us. It is building off a lot of information that we've collected from previous ADA participants. And we're really looking to develop a new set of classes that are shorter in total length. They're focusing on developing hands-on skills that are immediately transmissible into a lot of the analytics that we know that our participants do on a daily basis. We're teaching them using R and RStudio. This is a platform that is used widely across the data analytics space. It's highly collaborative. You can use R, you can use Python, you can use multiple languages within RStudio, so it's scalable to a lot of different types of analysts. And our focus really is on developing transferable skills, things that you can take into your daily work to replicate one of your workflows that you might have been using Excel for in the past. Well, if you want to build a pivot table, we'll show you a reproducible way to build pivot tables. There's a lot of these types of analytic tasks that we do on a daily basis as analysts, and it would be, you know, one of the things that we really believe in, as Nate and Ben both talked about, is the reproducibility of those tasks, being able to have a code base that you can depend on, that you understand, that does the reporting task or the analytic task that you're charged with without having to go back and reinvent the wheel every time. The last part of this that we're going to be talking about is we're going to be using a synthetic version of some administrative microdata that our colleagues at KY Stats have developed for us. This is going to allow users to get a real feel for what administrative microdata look like, as well as potential outcomes that could be linked to said microdata. This is going to give a feel very much like our ADA training, where you can have multiple information sources combined together. So it's going to be a very realistic, not a softball type of class. It's going to be a very realistic class in terms of the data and methodologies that we're doing. Next slide, please. So this all came out of us talking with our previous participants. At the end of every ADA, we do a survey where we want to know what we did right. We want to know what we did wrong. Where could we grow? Where are some opportunities for us? And a big trend that started emerging was an interest in more of a shorter course format to the ADA. A lot of times the ADA it's an extended period of time. It's multiple months, multiple times a week, potentially, people, you know, interacting with class. There's multiple lectures. There's group work outside, there are presentations, there are research projects. Not everybody wants that. A lot of people want to develop their skills, they want to build credentials, they want to have things that they can take back to their organizations immediately and have an impact. They may not be interested in a longer term research project, which is one of the pillars of the ADA, is you use these methods for a research project. A lot of people want to grow their skills again. What we're really going to be doing and focusing our first few of these short courses on are on key elements of data analyst workflows, data visualization, programming with R, machine learning model development. These are things that across a wide gambit of data analysts, job types and titles, these are things that people do regardless of your specific title. And so these are things that we're going to start with this year and start rolling these out. Next slide, please. Why? Why are we doing this? Okay, you can just tap through these. Okay, perfect. So the full ADA has a lot of goals to it. It introduces a lot of topics and a lot of the more foundational skills, the hows, the whys, the coding. Oftentimes there may be competing demands for these. So while in the ADA, while you do get some exposure to the technical side of the training, the bigger goal is to understand the data system. It's to understand how I can apply this to a research project I can take back to my stakeholders. So there may be some competing demands about what you're trying to get out of this. Go ahead and you can go ahead and tap through several more. So a lot of the times what we're doing here is we have to deal with increased complexity of data infrastructure. This is something that we deal with a lot in the ADA. You're not working with a single table. You're working with multiple tables of information, linking them together, often working in a subject space that may be very poorly defined. You're using data that weren't meant to be joined together, and you're using them for research projects. This is a lot to do in conjunction with learning the technical training of coding and data analysis. And oftentimes the ADA focuses on product development. Well, again, if you're an analyst coming to the ADA and these aren't your goals, then we want to try to accommodate that. You can go ahead and click a few more. So beyond the needs of the training, a lot of people, again, we're listening to our users have expressed a desire to have more foundational skills, time directly devoted to learning the intricacies of programming or data visualization or model development in a hands-on fashion. This is our goal. My goal as the instructor for these classes is to help you understand what's going on in terms of the code base, and then how you can apply it to the systems that you work with in your day-to-day operations. A lot of times, this can help push to some extent beyond what we can hope to do in the ADA, because we can come up with these tailored short courses for your organization. If there's something specifically that you're interested in doing that may not fit the mold of one of our pre-designed classes, we can talk about that as well. So what do these look like? What does the Coleridge Initiative short course structure look like? So these are going to be courses of between 30 to 40 individuals per course. It's all going to be conducted via Zoom. And what we're trying to do here is we're designing these to support learning from a diverse group of participants, right? Whenever you're teaching data science methodologies, or data analytics methodologies, you can't assume everybody is at the same place. I can't assume that you're all here to learn these techniques and that you want to take these back and use them in your work to make your work easier, to make your work better, and to make your team stronger, right? This is what my assumption is. The way this is going to work is, instead of a multi-month engagement with Coleridge, most of these classes are going to be on about a month-long basis. Okay, the ones that we're rolling out immediately are going to be, we're going to meet for 2 hours a week for 4 weeks for lecture and group work time, and then we'll have some office hour time outside of that, where you can get one-on-one consultation with our team to go over things that you found in the material that you might not understand, really helping you figure out which part, not only how can I use this, but which parts of this am I having trouble with, right? And again, this is all about meeting people where they're at and answering questions that need to be dealt with up front, right? If you wait until the end of the class and you have questions about the first week, we want to try to avoid that, right? We want to try to make sure that you get the best content out of this that you can. Another thing that we're going to be doing, again, to make this a very real world type of class, we are providing this experience with microdata so that you can experience what it's like working with these things to develop a visualization or some sort of analysis. And we're going to be, the ADRF is a secure environment. One thing that means is if you're trying to show people how to code, you cannot share your screen. In this class, since we're using a synthetic data product, we'll be able to use screen sharing. We'll be able to be highly collaborative between instructors and students in the class. And so this will then facilitate your learning the material better. We're going to begin in March 2024, and the first course we're rolling out is a course in exploratory data analysis and data visualization. What we have here on the right is a schematic of what I expect this to look like. This is a basic level course. This is not assuming that you have multiple years of R or Python coding under your belt. This course is for people who want to get exposure to these, but to these types of things, but they haven't had an opportunity yet. Okay, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be introducing you to the ADRF working environment and the RStudio IDE. These are fundamental tools for data analytics in the cloud that can be installed on any computer system, free of charge. We're going to cover exploratory data analysis. A lot of this is going to be data validation. I'm sure there's many people on this call who get data as part of your job on a daily or weekly basis. And one of the first things you have to do is you have to answer, is this data good? Where are the weaknesses in this information? And what can we do about it? There's going to be a lot of really decision-oriented data science being taught here. Then we're going to spend time, a couple of weeks, looking at ggplot, which is the fundamental R graphics library for producing visualizations, and plotly, which is an interactive method for taking those visualizations and making it so your users can select, they can filter, they can do lots of things on them that you don't need a dashboard for. A lot of times I don't need a dashboard to show a trend for a certain group. This can be done in a very simple situation with a couple of functions that are going to be highly transmissible to your workflow. This is the whole impetus about why we're doing this. Next slide. In terms of domain topics, we do have a few lined up. The first one is going to be this exploratory analysis and visualization class. Again, focused on developing key skills and having you expand your toolkit as an analyst. Data visualization is probably one of the most in-demand data analytics skill sets out there right now. This is going to get you into that, get data in your hands, and get you quick wins from day one. We're going to have a course on R programming, focusing on tidyverse. This is one of the most popular coding packages in the world of data analytics today. It focuses on readable, teachable, expandable, scalable code that's fast. It can interact with SQL databases. It can produce graphics on the fly. There's a lot of coding under the hood that we'll delve into. This is a more intermediate level class. We'll have an advanced data visualization class where we take those things that you see in the New York Times, that you see in The Economist. Like, I wish we knew how to make that. I wish I could make a map for my state, for my outcome. How do I do that? We're going to be doing a lot of interactive data visualization in this advanced class. And there's something here that you're saying to yourself, my organization could really use something like this, but it's not in this list. What do I do? We will offer some customized curriculum for organizations on a course-by-course basis, right? If you're interested in something, reach out. We can work with you to develop a curriculum that gives you the skills that you're interested in your team. Next slide, please. Just to wrap up on the short course angle, if you're interested in this, you're all on our listserv now. An application for the first class will be sent out tomorrow to everybody in our network. And this will be the first opportunity to apply for this first class. If you're interested, please, we expect again, about 40 seats to be available for the first class. And there'll be more information that comes out on this in the email tomorrow. There'll be future courses that will be announced on a rolling basis per demand, right? We have to have demand in order to teach these classes. They're going to go out on our listserv and on social media channels. So again, if you're interested in these things, if some of these topics sound like they would be useful to you, just keep an eye out for our communications, and these will be coming out shortly. And finally, if you're interested in a course for your organization, something that you might want specialized content, or you want to see a certain type of visualization, or your organization does X kind of analysis, how do we do that in R? Let us know. Reach out. There will be contact information at the end of the webinar where you can reach out to our training team and we can have that discussion.
I just want to thank everybody for being here. You know, we have a million things on our plates day to day, and even an hour taken out of your day to spend time with us, it's much, much appreciated. Again, if you're a participant thinking about, you know, hey, this might be for me, feel free to apply. If you have questions though, just reach out to us. You can email us at training@Coleridge. If it's training related, email us at training@coleridgeinitiative.org. If it's anything training related, if you're an agency, collaborator, data provider, you want to think about possibly designing a course for your agency, let us know. Again, happy to talk with you about what those needs are. We don't have, as Ben mentioned, we don't have a set curriculum. Every full ADA training we've done has been bespoke. We do not necessarily plug and play on everything. So again, we want to frame the course and the needs around the questions that you have. So happy to jump on a call. Again, funders, if there's any funders on call, again, we can connect on what sponsoring a class would look like in a domain that you focus on at your foundation. But please do reach out to us if there's any questions that you didn't get a chance to ask. And I know if you're like me, I always come up with a question like an hour later because something pops in my head. Feel free to email us. I do want to make mention, we have a Coleridge, our 4th annual national convening on the March 18th through the 20th. You can register at that link. We're going to, anything we may not have gotten to, or anything that comes in after the webinar, we're going to create an FAQ doc that'll accompany the webinar video and the slides. So keep an eye out for that. But you can go onto our website also and find the registration link. Please do. The convening is a great opportunity to see what some of the states are doing, to see what we're doing in the trainings, what we're doing in domain specific areas, some of the infrastructure being built. You can learn more about the ADRF. It's a great few days to really spend time on actionable data generation and evidence building, and then sort of how that's being meted out in practice. So please do register if you're interested. It'll be in DC. And then next slide, I think that's it. So again, pretty much right on time. We thank you all very, very much for your time today and wish you well. And again, please do reach out and follow us on social media if you're not already, and reach out if you have any other questions.